A solemn night at Lafayette Square here in New Orleans.
Dozens of Jewish people and community members gathered this evening to mourn those lives lost in Israel. People came together with Israel flags and signs for a vigil held by the Jewish Federation of Greater New Orleans. Clergy members and a number of local elected officials prayed for those held hostage to be safely returned to their families. They are calling for healing and the rejection of terrorism, praying for civilians of Israel and Gaza, praying for peace.
The numbers that get bandied about in the press and the media, and every single one of those people is somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's baby, somebody's grandmother, and we need to humanize the people who are captive in Gaza and the civilian loss of life.
The CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater New Orleans, Robert French, reiterates for the public to stay informed. Lafayette Square also had heavy police presence and was surrounded by law enforcement during this vigil tonight.